Hi, my name's Scott, the Miniature Maniac, and today we're finding the best paintbrush in existence, and it's definitely gonna make you a better painter. Well, not really, but it's gonna be pretty good. What up, mini family? Welcome back to Recommendation November, which is admittedly not the catchiest name for a series, but oh well. Last week we talked about primers, and I'll be coming out with a second, smaller video reviewing more aerosol primers based on your guys' concerns. But this week is paintbrushes, and brushes are much less scientific when it comes to comparing them, which is a good thing and a bad thing for me. It's good because that means there's less area for me to mess up with, but it also means that the recommendation that I have is going to be less based on cold hard facts and more based on my opinion. That being said, the paintbrushes we're looking at today are the Windsor & Newton Sable Series 7, Raffaele 8404, Broken Toad, Da Vinci Maestro, and the Rosemary & Co. Series 33. There are tons of paintbrush brands out there, but these are the ones that are most ubiquitous amongst miniature painters. They've been around the block. They're not simply a fad. And you also notice that they are all natural hair bristle brushes as opposed to synthetic. And as a quick recap, typically natural hair brushes keep their point for a much longer time than their synthetic counterparts, if you take care of them correctly. And if you're not sure on how to do that, I have a video that kind of goes over the steps and also the procedures for maintaining and also correcting issues if you find them. That's linked in the top right hand corner of the screen. But for now, let's talk about pretty much the only quantifiable thing when it comes to brushes, and that's their size. Here you see we have all our candidates in a size 1 brush. Brushes come in multiple sizes all the way from 000 up to size 12. A couple things stand out. Well, really just one. Brush sizes are not even close to being standardized. Their diameter and length vary wildly. The smallest in length of the size 1s is Windsor & Newton, followed by Rosemary & Co. and Broken Toad, which are really close, then Raffaele, and lastly, Da Vinci. When it comes to diameter, the fattest boy is Raffaele, followed by Da Vinci, then Windsor & Newton, Rosemary & Co., and lastly, the Broken Toad. For me, size does matter. Having a physically larger brush means a higher capacity for paint in your bristles, which means a longer working time and also fewer trips back to the palette, which then in turn means you can paint models more expediently. And as long as they all come to the same point, then you can get the same accuracy out of all of the brushes. And generally, with these nicer sable hair brushes, they kind of all come to the same nice razor sharp point. A physically larger brush also makes blending easier. Imagine trying to butter a toast with a piece of toothpick. You're kind of just making slashes at it. And that's what it feels like when you're trying to blend with a thin brush. When you have a bigger brush and it's wider, you can cover a greater area much faster, which makes blending on acrylic, which dries really quickly, a lot easier. You might say that, oh, you can just go buy a bigger brush in a particular brand, but it isn't necessarily that simple. Take a look at Rosemary & Co.'s number 2 brush. It's still smaller than Raffaele's number 1, and the bigger you go, the more expensive the brush gets. Something also that having a wider brush gets you is something that I've always called snap, or how rigid the elasticity of the bristles are. The more bristles you have and the wider the brush, the more snap the brush has. And generally, I feel like with more snap also comes more control. When a brush is soft and kind of easy to push around, I feel like I'm going to kind of get paint in places that I don't want it to go. Finally, probably the two most important things about a brush are how it feels when I'm painting with it, which is something that's kind of hard to measure, and also how durable it is. Now, I'm very familiar with Windsor & Newton, with the Raffaele's, and also with Broken Toad, but I don't know a whole lot about Rosemary & Co. and also the Da Vinci Maestro series. I'm going to speed paint some models from the others to kind of get an idea for how they operate, see if anything stands out. I'd like to run down each brush and kind of give you an idea on my thoughts on it. So let's start with the big famous boy, Windsor & Newton Sable Series 7. I personally dislike this brush, and I'll tell you why. In terms of durability, it has never seemed to last as long as my other sable hair brushes. In a year, I might go through 3 to 4 as opposed to 1 to 2. And the other reason why I dislike this brush is the ones that I've purchased come with a little tiny hair in the middle of the brush called the guide hair. And this guide hair is longer than the rest of the bristles, and it's directly smack dab in the middle, as aforementioned. So since this tiny little guide hair is kind of apart from his bristle brothers, he tends to dry faster than the rest of them. So what this leaves you with is a brush that has a hard tip right in the center, which means that if I want to do something that requires accuracy, like painting eyes or panel lining or hitting a real small area just in general, it's really difficult to do because my tip no longer deposits paint because it's hard and dry. If I want to deposit paint, I need to hit them all with the side of the brush. Now, this didn't always happen. It happened sometimes. And also over time, you can wear that little brush away. But I feel like a brush shouldn't have to be broken in. It should just work out of the box. I don't know if you guys have experienced this with Windsor & Newton brushes, but it happened to me like 3 times in a row. So I'm not sure if it's a quality control issue or it's an actual feature of the brush, but it was annoying enough for me to swear off buying Windsor & Newton brushes because that thing was just so frustrating to deal with. Next, let's talk about Broken Toad, the beloved brush of Roman Lapats. This brush is far too thin to be a daily driver for me, but I often use it as a brush for panel lining or doing very thin scratches. It has good durability, no guide hair. It's also priced pretty competitively. Now on to the Rosemary & Co. When I started painting with this brush, I kept having issues with a singular hair that didn't want to hang out with the rest of the bristles. It kept splitting off from the pack whenever I pushed a little hard, like when I was base coating. So I broke it off, and that solved my issues for the most part. Let this be a lesson to you contrarians and rebels. If you want to be different, you run the risk of being removed. I had a bit more splitting issues after this, but it wasn't that much of a big deal. Again, however, this brush is far too thin a diameter for me to be a daily driver. In terms of price, it's a little bit cheaper than the ones we've talked about so far, and that makes sense considering the potential quality issues or quality control issues that I experienced. Next up is the Da Vinci Maestro. This brush is pretty solid. It has good length, good enough width, and it's kept its point over the course of the minis that I painted with. I speed painted 3 minis with this model. The brush is pretty perfect, but there's a weird thing about it right now. The prices on Amazon are totally whack. The size 1 is like the right competitive price, but the size 0 and the size 2, so going up and down the ladder, just jump in price almost double. I think this is probably a fluke and won't stick around forever, but as of recording of this video, that's what it's like, so it's just a little awkward. Finally, saving the best for last, the Raffaele 8404. This brush brand has been my daily driver for probably the last 3 years. It's really big, it's durable, and it comes to a razor sharp point, and it's priced competitively. It ticks all the boxes. With the size 0 to 2 brush, you can accomplish all your miniature painting needs: base coating, layering, wet blending, conquering the world. If I had to recommend a brush, I would recommend this one. And you might think, oh, I need to go and buy a thinner brush to do like my panel lining and my scratches, but I would say give these brushes a shot before you go and spend more money. You can do quite a bit with that size 0. It's pretty dang thin. Down below in the description, you will find affiliate links to all the products that we reviewed in the course of this video, including the brush that I recommend, the Raffaele 8404. If you purchase brushes using these links, I get a commission kickback at no extra cost to you, and it means a lot to get your support in this way. If you like this style of video and you missed last week's primer comparison, you can find a link to it in the top right-hand corner of the screen. Stay tuned for next week, which is comparing paint sets done by a special guest, and also the week after that will be airbrushes. If you like the channel and you want to support it, I have a Patreon account with a bunch of fun rewards. I have a merchandise store that sells things like cutting mats and coffee mugs and patches for your blue jean vest. I also have an Amazon affiliate link that you can use when you're shopping on Amazon. All things linked below. Subscribe or die! And most importantly, don't forget to paint more minis!